Hi there, I'm Trevor Coote, and this is Business is Fucking Hard, the podcast where business owners pull back the curtain and talk about the realities of owning a business. We'll hear their stories, learn some lessons, and have some fun along the way. Thanks for joining us. On this episode, we are joined by Jason Lindstrom. After growing 2 startups with his business partner Bart, both resulting in successful exits through acquisition, Jason co-founded Bucket List Rewards, where he is currently CEO and managing partner. Jason's story is full of lessons in business, mentorship, and leadership. I hope you enjoy this episode. Jason Lindstrom, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I'm excited to be here today. I think it'll be a fun session.
Well, don't set your expectations too high. I want to be able to meet them.
Yeah, fair. Okay, I'll bring it back down to a baseline and we'll see where we go from there. So
exactly. I'm looking forward to this conversation. You and I have been introduced through a common colleague, and I think just knowing a little bit about your journey and where you're at today, it's going to be fun to unpack. And I think you and I kind of have a little bit of alignment in the way that we look at leadership and that kind of thing. So see if the conversation goes there as well. As I always do, I'll start off with the question on what got you into business. What was your introduction to kind of the business environment or entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, great question. It's funny. Thinking about that really brings me down memory lane. For as long as I can remember, I've loved building things that bring people together and create community. I think like my first real foray into business brings me back to when I first started university. I went to SFU, and when I went there, I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anybody who had also gone to SFU. My friends had gone to Douglas or to other colleges. And when I got there, I'm like, step number 1, let's make some friends. Let's build a community. And I figured one of the easiest ways to do that was to join the ski club. I've always been like a really passionate skier my whole life. But when I went to join this ski club, it was in non-existent. So I'm like, why don't I start my own club? So I registered for the club, which was super easy. And to kick things off, they're like, hey, you should we'll give you a couple of tables for clubs day. And it'd be a great way to recruit members.
Right.
So I remember having these 2 wooden tables, pretty long. I had 1 seat. It was just me and my club, my membership of 1. And I remember being beside the SFU rugby team, and it was that big rockin' party. They had 30 dudes, jacked, 2 TVs, music. And I'm like, I want to be like these guys. And I remember because it was just me, I was like, if I'm not there, how do I recruit members? So I took a piece of paper and I taped it to this little wooden table. And at the top, I wrote first name, student number, and email address, and I went to class. And when I came back from my class, I had 50 people had signed up to my little table. I'm like, that's cool. And so I taped a second piece of paper to my table. I had class a little while later, came back, another 50 people. And over the period of a couple of days, I signed up around 200 different members. And it was really cool. Like from there, I had the kernel of a community, of an organization, of a business. And I had to it logically forced me into the next step. And so I recruited an executive because I needed help to run this thing. I started charging membership fees, and we started setting up a ton of events. And I didn't know it at the time, but I think I was learning a bunch of the fundamental skills that I would then use later on in my life, whether it was recruiting, selling vision, or just having a super fun time building a business. And I think that was definitely the kernel to what became the later businesses and my future business career.
That's fascinating. So, in all of the conversations I've had for the podcast, I'm realizing in the response to that question, I'm realizing a few things. One is that we've got a child labor problem in Canada because everybody, not you, but historically other guests have talked about, pushing lawnmowers and going around and trying to, wash cars and do whatever in their neighborhood. But I will say that I don't know that anybody has responded to that question with something that wasn't directly business, that wasn't directly monetization. And I give you a lot of kudos for that. I think that so often we look at entrepreneurship as being something related to profitability or business being related to profit. And you're talking about, and rightly so, this development of skill sets. What is an environment where you're developing skill sets that you can then take on to future endeavors? And I think that is absolutely brilliant. And I honestly thought the story was going to be that the first 50 people when you got back to the booth were the rugby team that had signed up or messed up with your sheet on the in the booth or something. But yeah, like building that executive and taking that to the next step is all of that develops those skills that you need down the road.
Totally, yeah. And it's funny, you're talking about the profit side of business, and that's like that is, I mean, of course, a foundation to building a good business. Like making money is a way to keep score and generate profits and earn a living from what you do. But I've always like really enjoyed the team side of it as well. And I think that's what you're hinting at as well. Like there's all these other side benefits of building a good organization or business. And thinking back to the ski club, like it's really cool. Like from that executive team, one of the guys on the executive ended up marrying one of the members later on. A bunch of people were dating for many years. Like, but there's like what was cool is we built some like lifelong partnerships, friendships, and like a ton of good memories. Like I'm still friends with a bunch of people I went to SFU with. And everybody talks about what a good time the SFU ski club was. It was awesome. It was such a good time. Yeah. And I'm really proud of creating that legacy and, making sure people enjoy their experience.
Totally. I mean, university as a stepping stone in life is a big part about stepping away from kind of that group of people that you've spent your entire childhood growing with to finding other people. Right? Like what does that next step look like in life? And that's amazing. Good for you. That's I really appreciate that context to kind of okay. So there you've got a ski club, you've got a degree. What's the next step for you on your business journey?
Yeah. So it's funny you talk about meeting new people in your life's trajectory. While I was going to SFU, I met my future business partner, one of my best friends, who we've created 3 businesses together. It was funny. We were both going to SFU, and we ended up getting the same summer job together. We were working for the school board, cleaning flower beds at schools and high schools, and like nice. Basically, you'd be outside in the summertime, pulling weeds, and you'd either make friends with these people or enemies. In my case, I made really good friends with the 2 guys I worked with, Kevin and Bart. And Bart later on became my business partner. He's just like a really smart guy. We'd always talk about business and entrepreneurship ideas. And when I was close to graduating, what actually led to the first business, I got a job as a co-op student working for the Ministry of Forests as a communication officer. And I was kind of like networking inside that organization, having some fun. And I ended up meeting this guy named Sean Bethel. And Sean's like, hey, I really wanted to create a video to promote what we do here. And I started working with Sean on like this promotional video, and I wasn't able to get it done on my co-op term. And so I went back to Sean. I was like, hey, Sean, like I'd love to keep working on you with this, but can you hire me as a contractor? Can you I'll set up a business and you can hire me. And he's like, I'd love to do that. And so that became like the genesis for the first organization, which became an organization called Tidal Multimedia. And as soon as Sean gave me the verbal yes, I went back to Bart. I'm like, hey, man, do you want to start a business together, building like digital and multimedia presentations? And he's like, yeah, let's give it a go. Let's have a crack at it. And that was like kind of the first step into a real entrepreneurial journey. And that was like a pretty exciting and a whirlwind experience because at the time we had no money, we had no experience. We had no network. So it was like, on the one hand, very challenging time to start a business. But on the other hand, like we didn't have mortgages, we didn't have kids. Right. So our risk tolerance was super high. We were able to try a bunch of stuff out. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about, like usually at that point, I would ask the question about, your fear. What was the fear component of like, what if this doesn't work? But I think I already identified young, dumb, fewer risks, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
not as much to lose.
Yeah.
And that's a saying that I've heard more recently as well with entrepreneurship is you don't have as much to lose as you think, right?
Yeah.
Like we get stuck on all the things that when really, like, at the end of the day, just go out and try it. But in your case, what I'll ask is, one of the common themes in the podcast is this idea of there's no way to learn everything in business before you start your business. And in your case, that would even be more pronounced, where like just the logistic, the aspects of administration and operations, but also government remittances and financials and accounting practices and all of that kind of stuff. How did you navigate kind of those early years of figuring that out on the fly?
Yeah, there's probably two sources of learning. My business partner Bart was always really good at like recruiting mentors into the business, and we actually had a professor at SFU who was also a business consultant, David. That Bart kind of recruited into the organization, and we wrote a business plan, and we started getting feedback from David on everything. And from day one, he gave us tons of like really sage advice. And then the second source of learning was either through books or like Googling stuff, or what we came to call tuition. Like anytime we made a big mistake, that had a big price tag with it, we called it tuition, because we're like, like there was some good learning from it. And the other part of it is like, if you can chalk up a big mistake as a learning opportunity and you truly don't repeat it again, like that's not a bad outcome, right? That's what do they say? It's failing forward. So basically making big mistakes and getting advice from smart people is how we grew in the early days. And we made a lot, and we did in fact make a ton of mistakes, but it was a load of fun.
So two amazing lessons, and what I'll ask on the mentorship piece, do you still have mentors in kind of your everyday work, or are they more like formalized advisory board, or how did that evolve as you leveraged kind of those roles?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. Mentorship is something we've doubled down on over the years. So we've actually done more of it. So even though we've gotten each business we built two successful businesses. They both were acquired, and we're now running a third. But each time we implemented or built a new business, we brought in more mentors each time around. And so fast forward to today, right from the get-go, I brought in or invited a mentor to join me on the journey, a fellow named Sasha Williams. Sasha was the past president of a company called Unbound. So they're like this local tech success story. He built them to like a couple hundred people and a pretty significant amount of revenue. He'd done the exact same thing that I wanted to do, what I wanted to achieve with Bucket List. And so in the early days, it was pretty cool. I guess we got along, we became friends, and he started giving me advice. And it's fascinating. Like in the early days, a lot of times you can't afford to hire somebody with a playbook. You can't necessarily hire like an incredibly experienced VP of sales or like a really rockin' chief operating officer. But you can often find mentors who've done that exact same thing, often in the same industry as you want to do. Instead of paying them full time, you can pay them an hourly wage, sometimes give them a little bit of equity. That's what we do at Bucket List now. And we brought them into the organization, and they've been instrumental at like helping us address current issues. But where I see the real value in mentorship, and this is a line from Sasha, he's all about solving tomorrow's problems today. Like sometimes you'll, as an entrepreneur or a business leader, you make like an innocent decision that later on, 6 months, a year after the fact, you're like, my God, why did I do that? And there's been like this filter that's been applied to the business where on a weekly basis, I still meet with Sasha, and like any big decision or anything that's happening or anything underway, I kind of put through the Sasha filter. And, 9 times out of 10, we're on the right track. But once in a while, he's like, hey, you're about to roll out an employee stock option program. Like, let me give you some advice on how to do that both the right way and the wrong way. And he'll share both his experiences doing it the right way and some past mistakes on how to avoid. So it's been instrumental till today. It was so good that we've actually created a mentorship playbook inside the organization. And starting about 2 years ago, I said to the leadership team, anybody who wants a mentor, we're going to go out and try to recruit you one, and we'll accept 10 people into this program. And we brought in another 3 or 4 mentors, and we started having a bunch more formal mentorship. So it started with me, and we cascaded it down to the senior leadership team. And then we even opened it up to the wider company as a whole now as well. And we have systems, processes, and people to support that throughout the organization. Because at the end of the day, like there's nothing better than leveling up like a great person or a great employee, like where you can see they have the capabilities and aptitude to knock it out of the park, but maybe they don't have the experience. And if you can pair them with a great mentor, that can really set them up for success. And the final comment on that is sometimes as a leader, I have domain expertise. I'm strong at growth. I'm strong at sales. I'm weak at software engineering, programming, and I'm not the right guy to mentor or guide our engineering team. But if I can find a mentor who's done that exact thing, then I can immediately up level my leadership team and help unlock that person's growth. And they love it. Mentors love it. And as a team leader, it's so satisfying watching your people be the best they can be.
So we'll chalk you up as on the fence about mentorship.
50-50.
Not completely sold on it yet.
That topic. Yeah.
not completely sold. So I'm going to dig into it just a little bit more if you don't mind. Because it's fascinating, and we haven't gone down this road. This is conversation 24, 25, 26 or something that I've had, and this is the first time that we talked at this level about mentorship. So differentiate for me the value of mentorship. Well, the first thing I'll say is there's lots of studies out there that identify that what used to be perceived as the value of mentorship was completely mentee facing. There's lots of research out there that proves that the value of mentorship is equally divided between mentor and mentee. Both benefit equally from that relationship. Mentors get as much out of a mentor relationship as the mentees. But tell me a little bit about the differentiation between soft skills that the mentor is bringing and able to provide and kind of I was going to say coach, that might be the wrong word, but help people navigate versus the tangible skills for their skill set. So you talked about like coding and that kind of thing, but how much of it do you see as being an evolution of the person as, you know, kind of the soft skill, the leadership skills and the qualities that would bring them to be more of a leader within the organization and the community?
Yeah, I mean, really good question. I think it'll depend upon the mentee and mentor, but I'll speak to the experiences I've maybe seen. In the case of, in my experience, it's been a development of both. Like sometimes I'll in one 1 hour conversation, I might bounce between 3 to 5 different topics, and it might be like the art of having a difficult conversation. It might even be like going through the speaking points. I like to prepare in advance. So if I have a really difficult conversation coming up, you can kind of frame out the key bullet points. You can role play it if you want to. And that conversation's part tactical, part soft skills. And then you might bounce to a purely tactical conversation, which is like just getting feedback on like a recruiting process, for example. So it bounces between the two. I've definitely, as I've grown in leadership, it's what I found is like when you become a leader of leaders, you're spending almost all your time working with your team, up leveling them. And I still definitely love to roll up my sleeves and be productive and do work. But it's been like more of an up leveling of like my soft skills, like learning how to communicate to the team, how to like write out really succinct key messaging, how to like rally and motivate the organization. So it's over time, it's probably gone a little bit less from tactical and more to soft skills, I would think. But it definitely crosses both boundaries. And earlier on, you kind of mentioned about the impact of mentorship and like who gets the most value out of it. There's a study done by Gartner that says the average mentorship program has a 600% ROI. At Bucket List, in the first 3 years of operation, we grew revenue about 3,000%. We had this crazy rocket ship growth. And genuinely, a lot of that was due to like the outside advice we're getting, the guidance we're getting, because at that time we had like 3 or 4 mentors already in place, kind of guiding and providing their playbooks and recommendations on how to navigate the high growth. So the business benefited a lot. And what I've also observed with the best mentors, they will absolutely, their bucket will be filled by helping others. And in fact, I would say it's a red flag. What I've found with all the mentors we have in the organization is that they'll often start for free because they love to give back so much. And that's what you want to look for. And then if you're getting good value out of it, of course, pay them. Like, these are oftentimes incredibly qualified, really valuable people. Like, a lot of times they don't even need the money, but it's just more like a checkbox. It's a way to validate their time and effort. But yeah, I think it would be a huge red flag if their bucket wasn't being filled. And then having said that, I'll share maybe a couple of other tips to mentorship. In the world's filled with gurus and coaches. I've never gone to those people for mentorship. They might be great. I'm not knocking the coaches that are out there. A lot of times they're really good at PR and sales, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the best mentors I've found are they've held the role you want to hold. They've built a business to where you want to be in 3 to 5 or maybe 10 years from now. And they probably haven't, other than inside their organization, they may not have done a ton of coaching. Those are perfect individuals to tap. They also tend to be senior in their career. Like, they've kind of checked their financial boxes, the success boxes, and they're now like looking to create more of a legacy. And those are all green lights, right? Like, you look for that in your mentorship team, and then that could really set your company up for success.
Well, and that completely aligns with this message that I've been hearing, and that's been shared over and over on the podcast, and that we just talked about, is this idea that the majority of the learning happens from doing in business, right? Like, you can go through all of the courses you want and get the degrees and do all of that stuff. And I saw it even in my MBA, talking about degrees, where the professors who were completely academic would say things that, as a business owner, I'm sitting there going, that's not really how it works. Like, that's not how you can treat employees, or that's not what the expectation is in a work environment. And so totally makes sense that the coach of the people who kind of have those designations based on learnings versus the folks who have succeeded to the point or have been able to produce what you want to produce would be great guiding lights for you. Yeah. Totally makes sense.
That's I totally agreed. And good summary, Trevor. You actually triggered one other thought that's probably worthwhile sharing. Is you talk about like the coaching, and again, nothing wrong with coaching.
Yep.
But like in the early days, the people who are mentoring were also acting in a fractional role. So I got to see how they'd work on a senior leadership team. I get to see how they would speak at a huddle. Because to your point, like, modeling I learned by either watching somebody else or doing the thing. But like a lot of times, like, you can literally, you pick up a really good turn of phrase, like, oh, that's a great way to phrase or have a difficult conversation.
Right.
Or that's a great way to position something. And you create like this library of things to say, or a library or a playbook, an operating system on how to deal with different scenarios. And watching somebody do it is one of the best ways. I've had so many aha moments where, like, oh, that's how it's done. And I can then add that to my own little operating system and pull it out when I need it in the future.
Yeah. I find people are building those playbooks today too, but it's based on reels that they see on social media. You hear that so much, right? Like, you're in a conversation. Yeah, that's just like that reel, or just like that meme or whatever. Yeah.
You're like, but no, not at all.
No. But no.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay, so let's pivot back to your journey. You've started this company. You've got your mentor in place that's helping you manage some of the the early operational and kind of logistical aspects of business. Where and you've identified 2 companies, now the third, but the first 2 were acquired. What did that journey to success, like the success of being acquired, look like? And I'll add on to that. Was acquisition the North Star? Was that the kind of the direction that you always wanted to go when you started? Well, maybe not when you started, but as the company kind of progressed.
Again, great question. So to kind of give context, we built 2 businesses. The first 2 were purchased, and I'm still actively running the third, which is called Bucket List Rewards. And to answer the question around the acquisition, that was a really interesting journey. With the first business, we were really deliberate about how we sold it. Like, I kind of lost my passion for it. It was a digital media company, a digital advertising company. We were doing great work. We had like lots of cool logos and stuff. We were building these massive web applications, and a lot of the skills I learned there we used in the later companies. But I kind of lost my passion for it. And at the time when I was kind of like, my passion was going down the downward ramp. I remember going to this sales workshop by this guy named Jack Daly. He's like this amazing sales guru. And he talked about his entrepreneurial career, and he had talked about how he built this like 1,000-person sales organization. But one day he just woke up in the morning and he had no passion for what he was doing. And within 3 months, he had exited that business. And listening to that talk was an inspiration to me. I'm like, okay, it's okay to make these decisions in your life. It's okay to exit a business, whether you sell it or bring in a new leader. And so I listened to Jack's story, and I was like, I remember going back to my business partner back in the day, Bart, and being like, dude, like, I think we should potentially exit the first organization. And we hired a business broker, went to market with it, had our exit. And then with the second business, it was a bit more of a fun journey, because the first business only had about 15 people. The second business we built to about 50 staff. And it was having like a decent amount of success in market. And what was really interesting about that one is we were more focused on building a good business first and foremost. And we were in a very narrow niche. We created websites just for financial advisors. And there's only a handful of companies that were doing that. And a lot of the companies were being acquired. And it came to a point where all the companies had been acquired except this company, Advisor Websites. And we had people on a weekly, maybe monthly basis reaching out to us being like, hey, are you interested in selling? And that went on for years. That went on for like 4 or 5 years. And we'd often like softly entertain the calls, but not really seriously take people up on their offers. But I remember it came to a point we had a company we had partnered with. They were like they were an affiliated type of company. Their customers were asking for websites for financial advisors. They did social media and digital advertising for financial advisors. And they're like, hey, listen, are you guys interested in selling? And as always, we're like, hey, we'll have a soft conversation about this. And they came to the table with like a really, really, really compelling offer. And so we ended up exiting that business. And there's more luck involved with that. Like in retrospect, it was a strategic buyer. It was a really hot market. Like it was a really solid exit. But luck, Lady Luck played into our favor in that transaction. So yeah, that's kind of the story on the first 2 exits there.
So what was the first company was about 15 employees. What was the second company? What kind of size are you looking at?
Oh, we were about 50 employees at that point.
50. Yeah. Okay. And interesting going from kind of that digital media, digital marketing framework and losing passion around that to going to building websites. It doesn't feel like there would be like there's a strong opportunity for new passion in that transition. Was there? Yeah. Or was it just more building something fresh again?
So that's sort of really, really good, a nuanced question. One of the biggest pain points from running the first business is it was more of a professional services business. So we were always hunting and killing opportunities in front of us. And we might go to market and win like a really big deal. Right. I remember we had a spreadsheet. That's how we managed our finances. And even when you won this massive deal, like the revenue would go out 6, 9, maybe 12 months, never beyond that. And our expenses, like they just went on forever. And
right.
So I was like, oh.
Amazing thing with business. There's always expenses.
Totally. But with the second business, it was a product business and it was also a subscription-based business. So we had a recurring revenue stream. And from day one, that's how we launched it. And almost immediately we had a bunch of success with it as well. And so like the pressure of having to hit a target to be able to feed the team, that was gone. And that was like the big lever that was pulled to the second business. So I would say things improved, but with the second business, my business partner, by the end, he was definitely getting a little bit tired. He had a similar-ish experience to me. Like I could tell his passion for the business was waning. So
Yeah.
you're right. Like it wasn't like we went from making websites to, like doing adventure, taking people on eco adventures, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What was give me some idea of kind of points in life. So the sale of the first business and kind of getting into the second business. Where were you at with your kind of your personal journey as far as family, kids, spouse, that kind of thing? And then same question for the exit for the second business.
yeah, for the point in life, with the first business, I met my wife while I was building it, and then we got married, and then later on, I had sold the business, and then with the second business, we actually sold the second business, and it was before kids, and so I had 2 exits. The second one, pardon me,
Okay.
I sold the first business, then I had kids, then we sold the second business,
Okay.
and I had kids before the second exit, I guess you could say. So,
And
yeah.
So back to an earlier question, you've done, since you've had kids, you've done an additional startup, a sale and a start in a start.
Yeah.
And your response earlier was when you first started, you were young, not much to lose, all of that kind of stuff. But that's changing as you go. Is that changing your perspective of like the kind of the that foundation, that security blanket of having a business that, like, I mean, obviously the answer is no, but to what extent are you balancing kind of the risk of starting something new versus kind of where you were at early days?
Yeah, no, great distinction. Like I've always had a very high risk tolerance, but since I got married, but more specifically since I've had kids and have a mortgage, that risk tolerance has gone down.
Yeah.
So we have from one of the exits, we had a bit of a war chest, and like that's kind of like this reserve that I do not want to touch in future activities. Yeah. I don't want to lean into it, but there was certainly a time where I did a lot of that. Where I'd put all my chips on the table and I'd roll the dice, and it created like an intense amount of stress in my life and my wife's life. And so, yeah, fast forwarding to today, like I'm far more cautious than I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't decide how much of that is just natural. Like it literally just comes with age. Like regardless of your risk tolerance early on, you just naturally lose some risk tolerance as you get older, and some of it might be psychological. And then how much of it is attached to what's actually happened, right? Like if you kept taking risks and every one of them failed, obviously that would change your risk tolerance versus a whole bunch of successes. And you've been kind of, like you pointed out, like there's some elements of luck and those kinds of things. At one point during my business journey, we had some great success around sale of real estate and companies, and I was able to remove all of my leverage out of our personal life, so our house and everything else that was kind of my bank account to get some of my businesses off the ground. And I swore to myself, I will never leverage our house again for business ventures. Like the two have to now be separated because we're getting to that point in life. And it was not 6 months later that I stumbled across something, and I'm like, nope, got to do it. Got to do that second mortgage because I can't pass this up. But I mean, at some point you get beyond all of that for sure.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. It's funny you say that. I think we briefly chatted about this last time when we were scaling the current business Bucket List. When we went to market with Bucket List, it was doing something completely different than it is today. It was like this platform where it was a consumer-facing app where people could set bucket list goals. It was really cool. It grew really fast, lots of members, but we couldn't make money off of it. And we eventually got pulled into the employee rewards and recognition space. And when we were doing that pivot kind of around the 2015-ish or so, we pivoted from this consumer-facing opportunity to an employee rewards and recognition platform. And we had a handful of customers that are paying us. They're loving what we're doing. And I could feel down on my toes, we had something really, really special. But at that time, my business partner and I, we'd been funding the business from the second company, and it had cost us a lot of money. And we made the decision to cut off Bucket List from our this self-funding. And I remember looking at our bank account at one point, and like, we're down to weeks in terms of cash flow, but the expenses carried on for the future.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my wife at the time and being like, "Hey, honey, like, we have this one chunk of cash left, which is a down payment for our house." And I'm like, "Can I use it for the business?" And she's like, "Well, what are the odds?" I'm like, "I don't know." And she's like, "Well, do you think it's going to work or not?" I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to work, but I can't guarantee it. But I'm like, somewhere in my heart, like, I think this is really special, and I do believe it's going to go. And she's like, "Okay, I trust you. If you believe in it, I believe in it." And I took that down payment, invested it into the business, and that was the beginning of this insane hyper growth journey. Like, it did end up paying off. There was a couple of months where things were a little precarious, but it provided a tailwind to kind of catapult the company to where it is today, where it's like a large enterprise, lots of employees, serving hundreds of customers all over the world. So, but man, I tell you, like, but after that time, I was like, just like you, I'm like,
exactly.
I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that again.
Yeah. Until the next time.
Right. Yeah.
So let's transition into Bucket List, into your current venture. And you've teased out that, you had to do a hard pivot on what you actually developed for versus what you're doing today. But to expand on kind of that piece, that taking a risk on yourself, betting on yourself. There's so often that there's kind of this dichotomy of messaging for business owners, for entrepreneurs, for visionaries, for innovators. And one of them is always believe in yourself, believe in your passion, believe in your vision, invest in yourself. You've got this, you can win it. You just got to work hard and stay with it. And then there's the other piece where sometimes you look at a business idea and everybody around that person is going, "That's not going to work." Right? Like how can you even think that is possibly going to be something that works? And so it's this push and pull of as an entrepreneur, who do you listen to? And at what times does your voice should it be louder versus the voices around you? What kind of environment were you surrounded with as you were navigating to make those decisions to heavily invest and kind of know that? And as you pointed out, right, like, to be fair, you didn't know, but what were the elements that you needed in order to kind of make that last decision to say, "Okay, we're gonna go all in on this"?
Yeah, those are the fun moments, the fun questions, especially when you're in the future looking back and it worked out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
But it's funny that in that where I took the down payment of the house and I invested into the business, I had already had 2 successful exits. And so I had a bit of a playbook. But I think, and I said, I felt earlier, just a few moments ago, I said I felt it down on my toes, this passion and conviction in the business. What was actually cool is the Bucket List Rewards is a SaaS business, a recurring revenue business. And when I scratched below the surface, a lot of our fundamental KPIs were really strong. Like our net promoter score, our customer happiness score is like through the roof. Churn was like almost non-existent. And also the market was huge as well. And so like there was like some really compelling data points on why we should double down and invest. And also it wasn't like we were trying to create a market. There was definitely a handful of competitors in the space and doing quite well. Like the market leader they have like 800 employees. So they had carved a bit of a path. So I knew the market was there. I knew we could sell into it. It's more a matter of like, can we execute? And my background's growth, sales, and marketing. And I felt like in summary, we had product market fit. I was paying really close attention to some of the leading indicators. And I knew if I could unlock a growth channel, I could scale the heck out of that business because that's what I had done in the previous businesses. Like I I love scrounging around and finding distribution paths, like unusual distribution paths, growth channels. And that's literally what I did. I lean on my playbook, and I lean on the KPIs that I knew were there, that were giving me this conviction. But like, I think the fear that was caught up in it, I was like, as with any big decision, I'm like, oh my God, like buying a house in Vancouver is so hard. Like it's like, you know what I mean? It takes years to save up a bit of a war chest. And I'm like, I felt like I was honored my wife gave me that trust, but I was like, I just didn't want to mess it up. So yeah, it was a very exciting time to transition through.
That, I mean, obviously that builds a little bit of your conviction, regardless of how much conviction you had for the business and for the idea and for that piece of it. I mean, all of your down payment savings going away is as much of a motivator as the business itself. I want to. Sorry.
Oh no.
I want to unpack a little bit. If there's more to unpack around those KPIs, the indicators, the metrics that you were using, because on business growth paths, there's so much that needs to be data driven, right? As far as decision making, as far as process, as far as projection and kind of future vision. But how much of that data was available to you as kind of an early stage startup, and where were you getting where the KPIs would have been from your own internal uptake, but how much of you mentioned kind of this other company with 800 employees, where was that balance of data that you were using internally and the value you were putting on it versus the data you were able to get externally and the value you put on it?
Yeah, I've always had a huge bias towards data. I'm a passionate individual, and like that serves me sometimes in the right way. It could also pull me in the wrong direction.
Sure.
And so I try to lean on data to like make better, more well-informed decisions. And in other businesses, like we learned how to, like, we had a data playbook, and we had we use like Traction and EOS to provide a bit of structure to the organizations. And from the very early days, we rolled the same thing out at Bucket List. And so we had access to tons of data. It was a digital platform. We understood like utilization rates. We understood what a good churn rate was. We had it all. Like, I bet you compared to the average company of our size, one of our mentors commented on this. They're like, oh, you guys are like 3 to 5 years ahead of a company much bigger than yourself. Like, you guys are doing a really good job, a meticulous job tracking your data. And then just personally, like, what I really am fascinated by is like leading indicators of success or a failure. Like, if something's not working out, that's okay. You can iterate, change, and try to make it work, or you can cut it. But if something is working, it's really important in my experience to pay attention to those signs of success. And I'll talk a bit more about non-data-based leading indicators. There's something in the startup world, there's something called the rule of 20, where you'll have a concept. Let's say it's like a new SaaS product, a new recurring revenue product. You don't actually have to go out and build a bunch of code and spend a bunch of money. The rule of 20 says you talk to 10 real customers that are potential buyers. You validate that you validate the opportunity. Like, is there a problem we're solving? And are people willing to pay money for it? And then from 10 to 20, when you meet with number 10 to 20 potential customers, you put a sample product in front of them and you show them what it'll look like. You talk about the value prop, and you give it a number, and you ask people, are you willing to buy this thing? And are you willing to buy this thing is really important. In Canada, especially in Canada, people are so nice. And a lot of times you show your shiny new product and people are like, this is great. I love it. Like, yeah,
of course.
Do it. And then when you ask them if they're willing to buy it, that's when the truth comes. That's when the rubber hits the road. And they'll be like, yes, or they'll be no. And if people say yes, ideally you'll be like, okay, fine. Like, what if I give you half off in the first year? Will you buy this? Like, I will sign you up. And so without doing a line of code, without making any product, you can validate a product really quickly, and you can learn a lot about the market. And using that rule of 20, that's how we built Bucket List Rewards. We talked to a bunch of customers. We actually had a bunch of inbound demand over the years where bigger companies were reaching out to us, asking us if they could use our platform to reward employees. And they were telling us exactly why. So we had like strong signal. we had strong intent. The rule of 20 is a bit harder to quantify. Like if you're signing people up, check, okay, great. But that's one of the best ways to understand whether there's an opportunity somewhere or not. And we use that to balance out our data-based approach to decision making.
And then on the scalability factor too, right? You can establish the opportunity for market entry, but then you've got to know that there's opportunity to grow it, however that's going to look. Yeah.
And the opportunity to grow and market sizing, like that data and numbers, especially in this day and age, are so easy to find out with ChatGPT. When we were doing this back in 2015, that didn't really exist. But one of my co-op jobs, I was a market researcher, and I loved it. Like I loved scrounging around in the data, and like I learned how to understand market sizing and competitors and competitive landscape. And that's also part of my playbook now. So when I look at business opportunities, I try to like understand what's a macro environment and what's the micro environment, and then like what's the data to back up a good decision or bad decision. But I was leaning on all those skills and tool sets prior to tripling down on bucket list rewards.
I think the other I was going to say risk, but the other component of that is to know when to stop doing the research. Right. And I think that's kind of a safety valve for people in some situations, maybe not always in business, but certainly in employment kind of realms that I've seen is if we just research the heck out of this, we never have to make the decision to pull the trigger, right? Like we can just keep going down more rabbit holes. And I think there's an art to knowing, okay, I've got enough information, even though there might still be more out there if I want to keep pursuing it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that saying? Perfection is the enemy of greatness. Like when you try to do it perfectly, you're never going to leave the gate, right? You're never going to pull the trigger and get something going. So and it's like, how do you thread the needle on that? Because on the one hand, you can talk to one customer who might buy your thing and nobody else, right? Versus like somebody who spends years planning everything out to perfection. So I think I think there's maybe a bit of art to entrepreneurship in that piece, combined with like the grit to get it done, because invariably you hit those roadblocks that you have to overcome. So
I love that. An unfair question for you, and you're allowed to divert this one with a non-answer. What's next? What do you see for bucket list? Do you have a path to? Are you still inspired by it? Is there kind of an element of that same, been with it for a while and ready for the next thing? Are you intentionally moving towards acquisition now that you've had a couple of successful experiences with that? What do you see as being that next North Star for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. We wrote a 3-year vision for bucket list, our painted picture. And I'm really excited about the direction of the company, where we're headed and what's next. Like I really see us being potentially becoming a top 3 market leader in the space. I'm really exhilarated might be the right word, but the team around me, this is the best team we've ever recruited, and they're both fun to work with and inspiring to collaborate with. So I feel like when I look to like the left and right of me, I feel like willing to take on the challenges in front of me. So
that's awesome.
What I always say to the team is like let's just focus on building a really, really great business, executing against a vision, and the future I guarantee will take care of itself. Like as we saw with advisor websites, I think all in is 9-10 year journey before we had the exit. But when it happened, it just felt like a natural fit because we had fundamentally built a really strong organization. Right. So exit conversations are almost not an afterthought, but like when they come up, it becomes a much easier decision. The offer has to be extremely compelling to make an exit, which means it's going to be good for the founders and also probably really good for the employees as well. So we're just focused on building a really great company first and foremost.
There's a theme that's been coming up, and it keeps coming up partly because I keep bringing it up in the podcast. But this idea of purpose before profit, and you and I were kind of exploring before we jumped on, before we started recording. We talked a little bit about purpose, but from a corporate perspective, and this is kind of what you're talking about is building out. If you build out the environment and kind of that 3-year vision, that becomes aspirational for people. It provides some sort of meaning for them personally, that they're investing in something that's a little bit bigger, and they understand that. Then, as you pointed out, everything else will come. Everything else will fall into place, right? But you need kind of that vision and that meaning for people to drive them forward. And I think that's just another component of that purpose before profit. It's not just the purpose of the organization. It's kind of, why is everybody there? And then the fundamentals fall into place.
Yeah, I think that's a really compelling point. Like for I suspect there's probably a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this. There's a really good study done by LinkedIn that said approximately the vast majority of people, when they come to work is a part of their life's meaning. Like I think it's 80-ish%. I could be a bit wrong, but I think it's 80%. However, the vast majority of companies, if you ask the same employees what percentage of their companies have a compelling vision they can buy into, roughly 60+% say they don't know where the company's going or what the company vision is. And so like my takeaway on that is like your employees from a fundamental need want this thing, and you can provide it to them or not. But if you're not, that's a huge disservice both to them and to you. Cause like what I've observed, if you have a good vision, like it provides like when people say everybody can squint into the same future and see the same outcome. It gets people excited. It gets them motivated. You and I were talking earlier about what motivates a team. One of those is a really compelling vision where people can give back to the world. And then lastly, even as an entrepreneur, it's like so exciting to have a vision, to be checking things off on this journey that you're on. Like it's so motivating when there's a map in front of you and you can check off the milestones on your journey. So I think there's a huge demand from the employee side, and you got it. Sorry, in my experience, it served us really well. And I love both writing it and executing against it.
Yeah, and I think the other piece that we were unpacking a little bit is this evolution of leadership from kind of that stoic, standing at a podium, shadowy figure, telling everybody go and do your work because that's best for everybody. That stoic figure when it comes to decision making, when it comes to just being that figurehead, versus kind of this movement, this pendulum swing towards vulnerability, and I think, to your point, like when you bring people along on that purpose journey, on that vision, there has to be an element of vulnerability around that. There has to be an openness and an opportunity to share, a willingness to share from leadership. And it's not just trust me, I've got this. It's trust me, and I'm showing you all of my cards so that you do. Yeah,
I think that's an interesting spectrum there of the stoic versus maybe the vulnerability piece. In my own experience, what I've seen to be really effective is I definitely lean towards the vulnerability side. We even weave it into our leadership exercises. We did this exercise with the senior leadership team earlier in this year, back in January. It was a lifelines exercise where there were 6 of us in a room together, and each person came to the table and they talked about 3 meaningful moments in their life. And people went deep. And the idea is to talk about highlights in your life and also lowlights. And
right.
I tell you, like people they talked about deaths of loved ones. They talked about meaningful milestones of having children. And after that session, that group was more connected than ever before. And I think vulnerability is a way to bring people together.
Absolutely. That's a really cool exercise, potentially a risky one, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Like people creating an environment where people feel safe to open up like that. I want to ask you, I haven't asked this on every podcast, but I feel like, I just feel like your journey and your personality, this could be an interesting question. If I were to ask you, and I am, what was your hardest day in business? Would one day or one event or one scenario, one situation jump out above all else?
It's funny because it worked out favorably, but probably the hardest was when I had to dig deep, go to my wife and risk it all on the business. And I think earlier on I mentioned it was an easy one to talk about because it worked out in our favor.
Right.
Oh man, for a handful of weeks, months, everything was in the balance. And I was like, there was a period of time where I'm like, this may or may not go. And when I was living in that moment, like it was gut wrenching. And I was doing what I always do. I was looking for those really early signs of success. I was like, come on, like just one more win, get the ball one more yard down the field. And ultimately it ended up working out. But yeah, when you put it all on the table, you don't know until after the fact whether that was the right decision. So
of course, yeah. And that's a really good point. I talk about the idea of this podcast is to create an environment where business owners can be vulnerable, and that kind of helps other business owners or aspiring business owners and entrepreneurs to see that they're not alone, right? This happens to everyone. Yeah. And I started the first iteration of this was an article I wrote years ago about the first time I almost went bankrupt. The second time was COVID, but the first time I almost went bankrupt. And your point about being in hindsight is I probably had an easier time writing about the first time I almost went bankrupt than I would have about being vulnerable about the time I did go bankrupt. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting. Jason, I really appreciate you doing this. What a fascinating conversation. And I know that the listeners will be able to take so many lessons away from this and go out and look at things a little bit differently than they have as a result of this conversation. So I really appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Trevor. This has been a pleasure. It's always fun, kind of going down memory lane. And as always, I certainly hope people get value from it.
Right on. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.